Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the professorial inaugural lecture of Professor Michael Hardman. My name's Peter Larkham and I'm Professor of Planning at Birmingham City University. But I'm here tonight because in September 2009 I met a young man who had just enrolled to study for a PhD under my supervision on the strange subject of guerrilla gardening. That was Mike. I hadn't even been part of his interview panel, but clearly he convinced colleagues of his enthusiasm and abilities. In 2009, I didn't know much about guerrilla gardening, but we were then interested in developing the range of knowledge and research and looking for links across planning, geography and environment disciplines. Both Mike and I had a background in geography, and a favourite quote from Ron Johnston, former university vice-chancellor until he got bored with the admin, and president of the Institute of British Geographers, is that geography is what geographers do. So yeah, we could adapt to guerrilla gardening. And Mike did. He studied the very limited literature, he found people doing it, and he went out and did it with them. This was a PhD where you could really get your hands dirty, despite the ethical problems of being a participant observer in illegal activity. So he made contact with the local police and ended up as a special constable. Another ethical issue and another commitment of his PhD time. One of Mike's abilities is networking. He can relate very well and very quickly to all sorts of people at all levels, and that's a tremendous asset for a researcher, particularly given wider trends to larger multidisciplinary, even international research teams, and deeper engagement with research users. Perhaps his background successively as a Navy cadet and then the Special Constable helps him here. And Mike is a fluent and fast academic writer. He's equally good at communicating in more accessible and readable media. And you'll see some of his tremendous volume of output, much co-written with colleagues, when we go on to his presentation. And in fact, the last paper we collaborated on was published just last month. I just wish I could edit out his frequent use of somewhat. Maybe that's too vague a word for academic readers. But on the subject of voluminous academic output, Sir Patrick Vallance, formerly the government's chief scientific advisor, recently shocked a meeting at Birmingham University by telling the assembled academic audience he didn't care how many 4-star papers they published. What he really was interested in is whether that research made a difference. And I do think that Mike's research is making a difference with individual people and with communities. Much of his work may be smaller scale and local, but that's really where we can help people. Maybe change how they think or what they do, and that's making a difference. Mike's PhD was awarded in March 2013, a very timely completion, but our research budgets couldn't employ him for long, and soon he came back north here to Salford. Here he continued researching and writing. We managed to complete the book of the PhD thesis too, and he managed to survive, even thrive, in the world of teaching and academic administration. Since then, his output's been immense: publications, grants, collaborations, PhD graduates, and so on. So I'm delighted that Salford University has recognised the nature, extent, reach and impact of Mike's work. Progression from PhD graduate to professor in just a decade is a tremendous achievement. And the university is not only recognising this in terms of his past achievements, but in investing in the future, providing for the next generation of academic leadership. I'm sure that Mike's continuing work will benefit this university, its students and the local communities, and that's surely what all of us in this business ought to be doing. So I'd like to hand over to Mike to introduce him as Professor of Urban Sustainability to deliver his professorial inaugural lecture on the subject of greening the city, growing an urban revolution. Mike.
Wow, definitely blushing a little bit there in the sides. And thank you, Peter, so much for coming up tonight. And you're going to hear me say thank you quite a lot this evening. And thank you to you all, particularly on this cold November evening, coming out to give up your time and to listen to me drone on for about 45 minutes or so. I have got a lot on these slides, and Peter was actually telling me before, it's a trait that I've picked up from him, that I've probably crammed a bit too much onto these slides. And that was with you in mind, actually. I want this to be useful for you afterwards. Maybe metrics for bids, maybe some papers that might help you sleep at night if you've got nothing else to do, or some projects as well. So I do apologise that the sheer volume of stuff that's going on in here this evening. As Peter said, my name's Mike, Professor of Urban Sustainability. I've been at Salford for a decade. I'm going to take you through on a bit of a journey with my research acting as a red thread, taking you through what I feel is exciting about this idea of growing in the city, whether that's urban greening or more so today, urban agriculture, and some of the work that we are doing around this, some of the organisations here and further afield. Before I do that though, I just want to spend a few minutes just to say a few thank yous, and obviously I'd probably spend an hour otherwise saying thank yous to everybody. There's so many people to thank who've supported me and continue to support me through all of this. I want to say thanks to the events team, first of all, who literally I've never seen such an organised group before, who are always ahead of the scheme, always ahead of the schedule. I do want to say a special thanks to Tim Edensaw as well, who took a very much mediocre, below average student at the time and gave me the time, gave me the belief that I could do something a bit more as well. Obviously, my PhD supervisors, Peter, Rachel, Julian, I've got Nick, Nikki, Claudia, Alistair, all part of that Birmingham team. It was the loveliest place ever to be based. Joe Nazar, June Commissary, got me involved in this. The Salford crew, my GEM group, colleagues in the senior leadership team, Denise particularly, who really does create a space that allows you to delve into all these different bits of research and interested areas as well. And the list goes on. Community groups, international organisations, family and friends who are here tonight as well, who are always supporting me or online. And many, many more names I can't go through today. But I just wanted to give a few minutes just to recognise some of those who've been there through this journey. Swiftly moving on, I do want to take you through this journey. I want to take you through it with my research in the background, drawing all of this together, starting from the grassroots and going through to the radical large scale. A lot of these are my own pictures from around the world where I've done this work. This is one of my favorites, actually. This is the Red Sox Stadium in Boston, where they're growing food right in the heart of the stadium. Really gets you to think outside the box of what we can do with our urban infrastructure if we were to be creative. £6,000 worth of organic veg a year for the cafe there. I know there's a lot going on here with the AJ Bell, Forest Green Rovers and so on. But again, some really wonderful schemes that I want to reflect on as we go through this journey. And again, I'm going to take you through right from the start where I started my career embedded in Guerrilla Gardeners to look at kind of the quirky side of things and to take you through some stuff that isn't actually in the public domain yet as well, that might be of interest to those who are looking at green social prescribing, for example, and some of the projects that we're doing around there too. There's a lot that I can't cover tonight, and this is just an array of different organisations that have either funded or participated in my work over the years. International funders, some of which are joining online today in South Africa, all the way through to more recent projects funded by the EU. And indeed, there's a lot of papers that I can't get through tonight as well that don't fit with this kind of narrative of urban greening and growing. But if it tickles your fancy again, it's something you might want to look at a bit later on if you get these slides, and you can have a read about some of the transport work, some of the urban planning papers that we've done over the years as well. But I wanted to start from the beginning, and I realize that we've got a broad audience today. Some of you have done a lot on things like urban growing and greening, and some are relatively new to this area. And a lot of my passion is really connected around this idea of urban agriculture, this idea of growing in the city. 9.1 billion people on this planet by 2050, of which 70% will be living in cities. You look at Manchester in 2011, about 12,000 living in the city core. In the next few years, 100,000 people living in Manchester city centre. The pressure on our cityscapes has never been so great. And in response, these are just some pictures I've taken over the years of projects I've interacted with, where we're seeing more of these creative approaches to bringing green space into our urban areas. Whether it's where I've taken some of my students before in the top right-hand corner, which is just down the road, Eden, the largest green-walled building in all of Europe, or whether it's the green walls, the High Line projects of this world that we see in New York City. I saw the Castlefield Viaduct was just in the news yesterday as well, or where I take my students on the Barcelona version down there too. We're seeing more investment than ever before in these creative solutions, either for aesthetic benefits, biodiversity, or other value for urban residents. What I really want to delve into today, though, is particularly productive spaces, and to focus on these, which has been kind of a red thread bringing together a lot of my research over the years. This idea of urban agriculture, which indeed in itself is a spectrum. There's almost a typology of practice here, from allotments, community gardens, through to urban farms, hydroponics, aquaponics, peri-urban spaces as well, and everything in between. Again, I've never seen so much interest and investment in this practice than ever before. And just some of the metrics here that might amaze you, particularly with regards to the more radical end of this spectrum, how much we could potentially transform our cityscapes if we were to scale up some of these practices. I'd really urge you to have a look at Joe and June's original concepts. We add to it from the UK perspective, an online repository of exemplar practice from around the world. You'll see there's some Manchester case studies in there, some Birmingham case studies. It's a free resource that might be of interest to you, collating lots of this good practice, lots of this innovation globally. It's also a physical exhibition as well. So I've hosted this with Peter actually in Birmingham over a decade ago. More recently in Manchester Cathedral. We even transformed the top floor of our Media City campus into a productive geodome, seed bomb making with primary school kids, as well as Carrot City as a backdrop as part of a science festival. So if it, again, interests you, I've got the exhibition. It's filling up my office, 100 boards at the moment. It's a call out there if you want to use it. Feel free to drop me a message, and I'm more than happy to lend you that resource. I'm sure Joe and June and Carrot City will be keen on that too. But reflecting now on my research a bit more, and again, I want to take you on this journey from what Peter was talking about, where I started around green activism and guerrilla gardening, and moving now to some of the projects that we're working on, looking at green social prescribing and large-scale urban farming in particular. Guerrilla gardeners you might have seen before in the news. They're in the news a lot nowadays. And I could see one of my colleagues just nodding here. These are just a mosaic of pictures where I've been interacting with groups over the years. I've been writing about these groups, being an ethnographer embedded in them quite early on in my career. We've got in the bottom right-hand corner here, a group down south, another group here you can see creating a community garden space. And even just about 2 weeks ago, I think, looking at one of my colleagues in Manchester city centre here as well, in the middle of a student field trip. Indeed, there was a guerrilla gardener on Salford's campus right under my nose when I first started here, an IT technician that wanted to beautify parts of the campus and was just going out there without permission and changing landscapes as well. It's everywhere and it's growing, again, more interest than ever before. This is a video that I haven't shown before. And you can see why I have to carry my ID everywhere with me, and I still do, because I look about 12 years old. And this was when I was originally embedded in the guerrilla gardening groups. And if you're interested, you can flick through on the video. It gives you an idea of just the sheer size of some of these sites and the transformative nature of guerrilla gardening.
What these guerrillas do.
I'll let it play for a second.
Look right there is where phase 1 and phase 2 of the dig was. So that's where they put a bit of spinach, a bit of peas, and just kind of beautified the spot down there as well. If you come down this way, this is what's just happened today. So this is phase 4 of it. And what they've done here is they've done it again. They've just regenerated the land. They've put a lot of different produce in here, a lot of vegetation as well, just to make it look a bit beautiful. But using the video, I can show you how busy it is on the road behind as well. Because this is an inner city dual carriageway. It's quite busy, 50 miles an hour, cars going past. And right over here as well, we've also got another busy road, which is 2 lanes. So it's pretty hectic around here. It's very public, it's daylight, everyone's here, it's exposed, police going past, everything. So it's pretty dangerous.
So again, just gives you a bit more of on the ground work here and what I was doing. For 2 years, I followed this group at the time, following them on evenings, weekends, being embedded in a lot of their activity. And I've done that around with other groups as well, particularly earlier on in my career, more recently with colleagues internationally. Those of you who are eagle-eyed can probably spot a celebrity on there as well. Bizarrely got involved in some of the activity. Bez from the Happy Mondays had an interesting meeting one day at Christmas, which I probably talked to you about over drinks with Bez, who was really passionate about this movement and seeing this as a catalyst for wider transformation of our urban areas. I'm really interested, before I show you some of the research and reflecting on some of the practice on this, to get your views, a bit of audience participation, because it is an evening, it's cold. I don't know if everyone's had enough coffee today as well. If you haven't used Menti before, if you wouldn't mind just going on your phones, you go to menti.com. If you enter this code, I'm interested to get your perspectives on guerrilla gardening. Do you think this is a good idea? Should we be having more of this kind of informal approach to greening the city? Or is it a bit bizarre and a bit like something we shouldn't be encouraging that much within our urban areas? So just for a couple of minutes, just to see, hopefully this will update. If it doesn't, then we can see it was working before. Oh, apologies. There we go. There should be some on the sheets as well. I think they were passed around by colleagues. So I'll just give everyone 2 minutes just to fill this in. If it's working. Has everybody got the code? Yes. Oh no, it's not working. You can try these things with IT. Is it working? Can someone tell me, what are people thinking? Is it great? Great. So good ideas. Yes, yes. We can practice this all day long, but it never works on the day. So a lot of people do like this idea of guerrilla gardening. And indeed, what we're finding now is even more creative ways of doing this in cities. It's not just on the ground anymore. There's evidence to show this is happening on rooftops. This is happening as a form of protest as well. Some really good text out there that you might want to look into to give you an idea of the spectrum of guerrilla gardening that's going on in practice. And indeed, TikTok. I don't use TikTok. I've no idea about TikTok. But apparently, TikTok is leading to more of this happening. And there's questions around the legalities of this. So this is something I've dealt with my research. Peter's kind of spoiled slightly by my next slide here, because at the time that I was embedded with these guerrilla groups, I did have a huge ethical issue in that I was also a police officer, a special constable. I could arrest people. And so technically I was viewing an illegal activity and at the same time on an evening or a weekend going out there and policing my neighborhood. If you're interested in that, have a look at it in my book. I do deal with the illegalities of all of this. And indeed, a colleague at Edge Hill has recently done a fantastic paper digging down to this in a bit more depth. But just to summarize my research before I move on to formal practices in this environment, if you look through all of my publications, whether that's focused in the UK or internationally, my French GCSE teacher will be very proud. I've got one in a French book there, talking about militarization of gardening as well. This kind of sums up some of the broad themes that I found and colleagues have found over the years. That guerrilla gardening can be a catalyst for things like these larger scale urban agricultural projects, the incredible edibles of this world. A lot of the projects that we see now that are making huge impacts on our urban landscapes started through guerrilla gardening activity. It was a catalyst for wider change. People are fed up with the bureaucracy, the insurance, the risk assessment, the costs of doing things formally. It's slow and it's painful, and guerrilla gardening is a tool to bypass a lot of those systems. We've seen a rise post-COVID, and also, we've seen more concerns kind of voiced around guerrilla gardening as well, not just in terms of illegal activity, but my research and colleagues' research has shown there's a risk element to this. Heavy metal contamination, lead, arsenic, potentially, if you're growing for productive reasons, you're not testing the soil. There's also an issue around inclusiveness as well, because guerrilla gardening is not just going against authority, it's about colonizing space without often the permission of the community who surrounds that landscape. And so there's issues of conflict there as well that were kind of raised as part of the work that I've done. And I really think bringing this right up to date, this idea of the right to grow, some of you might have heard about this, which Incredible Edible is leading, this idea of making it easier to use land in our cities for production or other types of green activities, could be a game changer here. And this is where I feel some of the research needs to be focusing now. Will this enable more people to opt for the formal route if they can get support easier, if they're not having to come up against these barriers, financial or otherwise as well. And I'll mention this at the end, actually, because this isn't just a pie in the sky idea, a theory, but actually something that's been implemented on the ground. Cities are actually putting this into practice. I want to swiftly move on now. I did tell you there's a lot in here, and I do apologize, but again, you can have a look a bit later on. And I want to speak about some of the work that I started doing, particularly at Salford, which is around more formal practices in the city around growing, and then bring you up to date with what I'm doing at the moment as well. And again, a spectrum of sites here from around the world, in Slovakia, in Barcelona, where I've done some work before, here in Salford and Wythenshawe, where I had a project for a few years. And if you're interested, there's a lot of kind of text out there you can delve into from back in the day, looking at some wonderful work with Rebecca, who is here tonight, one of our first PhD students, who led some work in Wythenshawe, right through to a recent publication that's just come out this month with some colleagues, and you'll hear about this project in a minute. As opposed to me speaking about the project, I want Hayley, who I'll introduce, to speak about the wonderful work they're doing on the ground as well, and to hear about that innovative practice. So if it tickles your fancy again, you can read it into these, and it's all available for you on WorkTribe or Google Scholar. I think what often frustrates us as academics is there's a lot of grey literature or hidden reports that we can't share as well. And I've tried to summarize a lot of this in this next slide when we're looking at maybe smaller scale urban agricultural activity. And again, nothing particularly might jump out to you here, but this is summarized in a lot of the grey and academic literature that I've worked on, looking at the power of these spaces, the transformative nature of these spaces, even small scale, huge social, environmental, economic, and health benefits for communities. There's been another large growth of particularly community gardening post-COVID. Some of you might think critically, well, you know, less protection than allotments might be easier to build on those spaces. That's why we might see this form of urban agriculture getting a bit more backing than other forms potentially. And there's obviously challenges there around, again, soil quality in terms of setting these spaces up, some costing thousands, if not tens of thousands, to establish over time. I just want to provide you some depth now as opposed to looking at the breadth. And one which stuck out to me when I first started at Salford and made a massive impact on my career was Wythenshawe, which was a £1 million lottery project that we were partners with for quite a few years. Unfortunately, I drew the short straw here and had to dress as the flower for the day to try and attract people to fill in our survey. But this is part of an evaluation. We had Rebecca, who was doing a PhD at the time, funded through the project as well. And we were really interested in the productive benefits, the social benefits of this scheme. If you've not heard about Real Food Wythenshawe, do have a look at it. It was a groundbreaking scheme, really transformative. Our research showed that it made a huge impact on that community and, again, started a lot of these smaller community garden sites. Really doing a lot of early kind of green social prescribing almost in those days as well, getting involved in things that are getting a lot more popular now. More recently, my work has focused more on the health angle of this, working with colleagues like Michelle and Penny, who have really opened my eyes to new avenues and really been fantastic people to work with for the last decade. And we've got a project at the moment that means we'll be working together for a lot longer as well. And this is actually a live project that I want you to hear from, as opposed to me talking about the value of these spaces and the transformative nature. So I've invited Get Up and Grow, Hayley, to come along today. We're in the second year of a grant with Get Up and Grow, looking again at the value of community gardening, the value of this green activity. And these are just some photos from a paper that's coming out this month. Lydia was a fantastic research assistant on that project, embedded with the group for about a year at the time, working to get some feedback from the community and look at, again, the power, the transformative nature of these spaces. Just a quick look at some of the material that was gathered through some of the diaries, some of the interviews that were done. People really valued this space that Hayley operated, this community garden that we focused on at the time. It was a catalyst for bringing together that community that was quite fragmented and continues to do that as well. I think what's really innovative about Hayley's project is that she was conscious that the garden could only be operated for so long of the year, and so came up with this conscious strategy to have these other activities to engage the community during the winter, during these darker nights as well, and to again have that focus on health and well-being. I'm going to hand over to Hayley because Hayley's going to take you through. I'd rather Hayley tell you a little bit about this power of this project as opposed to me speaking for them. And afterwards, when you get in the free drinks later on, Hayley's brought some freebies as well, and we'll be having a little stall over there as well that you can speak to her about. And again, delve into some of the things that she's going to touch on. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Hayley Watson just for a few minutes to talk about the work that she's doing on the ground and what we're doing as part of this grant as well. Thanks very much, Hayley.
Well, I'm not sure how I follow that really, but yeah, Get Up and Grow, I've been doing work in the community for probably about 7 years now. So we started out, we're a grassroots organisation, and we were doing this project with the lovely Lydia, the PhD student. She'll be zooming in on there somewhere. Hi, Lydia. So we've done lots of different things. So my name's Hayley Watson. I'm the co-founder of director of Get Up and Grow. And we do work in Oldham and Rochdale. So we've done different things. And this is the other co-founder, Michelle. So this is a tribute to her as well. So I was born in Rochdale. So the thing that inspires me to do the work that I do is it's local and it's local to the area, and it's about putting back into the community and growing the community together. And I think COVID's reflected that in a great deal. So we work with a lot of different partners. We've been working with a prison to create seed bombs to distribute to local school children. We've done lots of different things because it's about involving everybody in the community to take part and learn about each other. So we want to create a B road that will educate and improve the biodiversity of people and the production and community engagement. So Michelle was the co-founder, and she's left this legacy for us all to be inspired by. So what we do is social and therapeutic horticulture outreach in the community. Thrive are the leading specialists in this, and I'm currently doing my diploma in my second year. Can't wait to get it finished. But it just reinforces what we're doing and what we're all trying to do and what we're all trying to create. So recently we've been doing some more work, trying to link in with the green social prescribing. So Rochdale was given a pilot to do more work around that. So it's really interesting how it's evolving, working with the GPs, working with the pharmaceuticals, and we're obviously trying to create more of this. So outside, like we said, we've got some packs to distribute for a sample of what we do, just to show you. And we work in partnership with Action Together. As we all know, Action Together support all the community to start up. If anybody wants to start up a project, Action Together are the people to get involved with. So they'll help you set up your policies, procedures, everything. So it's quite good if anybody's interested in doing that. So Get Up and Grow are currently involved in about 11 projects, and there is only me and half another person. So I am very, very small, very small, but together we can grow together and create something amazing. So we try to make sure that we are going forward in the right direction. So we try to make sure that the living wage, if we do create more jobs, then that's what will happen. Everybody will do that. We have a lot of volunteers that help us because I couldn't do this on my own. And the volunteers are such a powerful contribution to what Get Up and Grow do, outreach in the community, and I couldn't do it without any of them. So I'll say hi to them as well. I'm sure some of them will be watching. And these are just the birds. Listen to the birds. And just some more pictures of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that, and that's it from me. I'll hand you back over to Mark. He knows that I don't like public speaking. Thank you.
I just wanted to invite Hayley up and thank you for sharing that, because I think it's a lot more powerful coming from the actual experts who are doing this as opposed to ourselves as researchers sometimes as well. And so again, this is part of a 2-year project. We're in the 2nd year of this now, and you can hear more about this afterwards if you're interested. I want to go up to Hayley and see some of the work that's going on too. I just wanted to situate what Hayley was talking about within our wider work, and particularly link into a paper that Michelle led, which has been really impactful in the British Medical Journal, that shows, again, the power of these spaces. This was a meta-analysis, if you will, a systematic analysis of often kind of quantitative studies that have looked at people being monitored on these spaces, hearts, monitoring equipment, cortisol, and so on. And this is one of the logic models that was generated from this work that shows, again, the outcomes of these spaces, the transformative nature, again, of what a community garden can do. It doesn't have to be a large-scale project. Again, there's a lot of benefits in terms of health and well-being that can be generated from these landscapes. I know those who are doing social prescribing in the audience now are probably not particularly like some of these stats, but I think for those who haven't come across it before, I'm not trying to say this is a fix-all for everything, it's going to transform everything, but it gives you an idea again about some of the power of the schemes that have been monitored, and how, if we were to scale this up, the cumulative impact maybe of some of these sites as well. You probably can't see in the background, but actually this is a keynote that I was invited to give in Rotterdam over the summer, where they rethought how they use their urban landscape. They opened up the rooftops around the city, 60 rooftops in total. And this one really stood out to me because it was a hospital. And this hospital realized it was a congested urban environment. The nearest park was too far away for patients or staff to access on their breaks or to get there comfortably. And so they thought about transforming the rooftops for growing food, but also for therapeutic purposes as well, having that landscape right in the heart of the hospital estate. What was quite amazing about this space, unlike many of the rooftops we see, it was accessible to all. So public could go in. It had lift access, very inclusive in that sense. Regardless of how able-bodied you were able to access this space free of charge. And it was a really powerful project, again, to show how creative we can be with regards to what Hayley was talking about within our cities. Again, a huge appetite for this moving forwards. If you're interested in this, you'd probably be interested in our brand new project that started literally about a month ago. So led by some amazing colleagues in Barcelona. This is GreenMe, which looks at scaling up these solutions across Europe and across the USA as well. And you can see here the team that's together, the University of Salford, we've got Kent in the UK, Social Farms and Gardens heavily involved there, and Mind as well as lots of other key actors bringing this together. And we're looking at this across the continent and across the US to look at good practice and effectively to look at how we can support this going forwards. I'm particularly interested in it from the lens of urban agricultural sites bringing in new revenue and furthering their impact as well within cities in particular. But if you're interested, do have a Google of GreenMe, have a look at the Barcelona website. It's so new, I don't think we've even got any social media presence yet, but it'll be up there soon enough. Lots of opportunities to get involved, and Greater Manchester is one of the key case studies. Ourselves, Edge Hill University with Michelle, Penny, we've got Sarah as a new researcher here as well. Again, hot off the press, just starting now, linked to that agenda. Swiftly moving on now, and I want to kind of bringing this to a close, is to look at larger scale transformation in our cities. So I've tried to design this by looking at my research around the micro, what you might see as smaller scale formal activities, and last but not least, large scale, real transformative activities within our cities, urban farming, rooftop agriculture as well. And this is just, again, a mosaic of some projects that have really influenced my work and writing over the years. Where I take my students every year, Farm Urban in Liverpool, growing underground, using some really cool high-tech systems there. Whether it's my work in New York City here, on some of the large-scale rooftops that many of you would have heard about. And these are some of my students in the top right-hand corner in Barcelona, actually on a rooftop as well. You can't really tell from that photo, but we went to look at rooftop urban agriculture there in Barcelona too. You might think this is all international and far away from where we're sat right now, but believe it or not, not that long ago, there was actually a large-scale urban farm proposed just over the road from where we're sat in Pendleton. So where the McDonald's is, straight across from the campus, part of the 15-year master plan. You'll see on the original plan here that there was a focus there on creating an urban farm right in the heart of Salford, with the idea it would create jobs and have an impact on the community more widely. I think things have changed since then. They've created some more productive spaces, and indeed we've seen similar models being implemented across Salford. Some amazing projects out there that I'd urge you to look into. In terms of research, and just to give you some depth here and reflection on some of the work that I've done with colleagues over the years, this is a project that stood out to me. In fact, Graham is in the audience somewhere. I think I saw him before. A project a while ago that we went to look at different types of urban farms as well, to look at how they had different challenges, different opportunities, different benefits for the community. That was a wonderful project that we've since gone on to publish in a paper that came out only last year. This is some of the take-home messages from that grand tour of urban farms that we went on. How many were struggling financially at the time. A lot of this data was pre-COVID, so post-COVID, you can imagine the pressure there is even more intense. And again, similar traits to what we saw with the other formal sites, vandalism, in terms of getting started, sustaining activity, even though they made such a great impact on the areas in which they resided. There is hope though, and there's a lot of really good practice out there that we've been involved in, been working with for years. You've got the Withenshaw, the Woodbank sites around here, so many within Greater Manchester that I'd urge you to go and have a look at if you get a chance. One of my favourite ones that I've been working on for the last few years is Northern Roots, that some of you might have heard about. 160-acre site with an urban farm at its centre. And myself and some of my research team have been working on that since its inception. The original feasibility study, the ecological assessment, working with FoodSync on the economic assessment as well, to look at how we can model and how we can actually make this a reality. And I think Northern Roots really shows you how urban farming can be a catalyst for wider transformation as well. That space isn't just about food production. It's got a green social prescribing scheme now, which is being scaled up and is doing some wonderful work in Oldham, right in the heart of that community. It's also acted as a catalyst for wider sustainable transport schemes, such as the £5 million bridge connecting Oldham to Thameside and the national cycle route there as well as the visitor centre that's being constructed, and so on and so forth. If you haven't seen it already, I'd really urge you to have a look at Northern Roots, visit the site, have a look at how exciting this project is. And again, if you want to see some of the academic work done behind it, I'll flash up some papers in a bit that reflect on some of those early assessments that we did that helped to lead to Northern Roots becoming a reality. And indeed, we've linked this across to some of our other projects as well. This is a project that I'm not speaking about today, but is working with the Roma community, with our colleagues in social policy, as well as a wonderful charity called Kaskasan. And this was the group going out onto Northern Roots and getting involved in some of the activities on that space as well. And I think that's what Northern Roots is doing superbly, is connecting to different communities, making sure they're taking an approach that is really embedded within that local population, but also conscious again of how it can connect regionally and further afield too. And if you're interested again in some of the academic side of things, this is just one of the tables from one of my recent papers with Graham and Andrew Clark, where we analyse different large-scale forms of urban farming and look at reflecting again on those opportunities and challenges in a very basic way, obviously in this table, with some of the data underpinning it in the broader article. And indeed, we've looked at urban farming not just in the UK, but globally as well. I've had some wonderful PhD students and researchers over the years. Teo, who did it in Nigeria, did some wonderful field work in Nigeria. A lot of parallels with the challenges and the opportunities that we have here in the UK. I know they're tuning in online. Hope and Lovemore, who I've worked with for over a decade now at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, looking at Kenya and Zimbabwe here. some work we did a few years ago. Similar challenges, soil conditions, the financial constraints as well, but also the power of this activity. Urban farming, again, seeing more investment than ever before, a lot of interest out there, a lot of really cool studies coming out actually to look at the potential of this to transform our food systems. Swiftly moving on, because I'm looking at the clock and I realize that we need to be wrapping this up. I've chucked a lot in here, but again, hopefully relevant to the broad audience, lots of metrics, lots of material that you can take home and digest a bit later on as well. What I think we need to do moving forward, and in fact, this paper's just come out this month with AJ at Derby County Council. I think we need to definitely further these creative approaches, rethink our cityscapes. We picked on car parks, for example, multi-story car parks, which you probably think now, if you drive into the city and you drive into a multi-story car park, many of you won't drive to the top level. You'll park on the second or third level where possible. With the creation of the clean air zones and more restrictions on vehicle usage, you can see how these are going to become more vacant over time. One of the biggest constraints with regards to rooftop farming is obviously weight capacity and accessibility, not very inclusive as well, as we discussed before. And so this paper looks at the appetite of transforming multi-story car parks and other aging infrastructure in our cities for things like urban farming and some of the schemes that I've spoken about today. And this isn't just, again, a pie in the sky idea. I'm looking towards Peter, actually, in Birmingham, where this is actually being implemented in the Jewellery Quarter, right in the heart of the city, creating an urban farm in one of the most congested urban environments here in the UK. I think there's a lot more we can do as well. We need strong policy, and this is just a reflective piece I did with Nick Davies up in Glasgow, Caledonian, who used to work here at Salford as well. Looking at the power of policy in terms of green roofs and edible rooftops and how it can lead to transformation across our cities. This was for the World Economic Forum at the time. I think some of the work that we're doing with the Czech University of Life Sciences around different types of soil, biochar, lighter membranes as well, to make sure that we can enable some of these creative solutions. And that's where I feel we need, again, a bit more research to explore this in a bit more depth. I do feel that we need to be conscious, again, of that social value element. And we need to be careful, again, if we're proposing these wonderful, very utopian, very aesthetically pleasing ideas, that it needs to be inclusive. It needs to make sure that it's open to all, regardless of income or abilities. And that's my biggest bugbear, particularly with a lot of the rooftop schemes. I can't think of any that you can just walk up to and go up for free in the whole of Greater Manchester, if I'm not mistaken, and particularly food producing rooftops as well. So, you know, as we're encouraging this, we need to be aware of the audiences and making sure that they're at the heart of these decisions. I think we can look at good practice elsewhere. New York City have got an actual office of urban agriculture now, taking it really seriously, pumping a lot of money into this, linking it to the public health agenda as well, and scaling up again in a very congested urban environment. And so on and so forth. These are some of the papers that are coming out. Again, this is coming out in the next month in cities, which is looking again the risks of scaling up some of these activities. It's something we need to be aware of, something we certainly need to reflect on as an academic. That's something that we'll be working with Haley or other projects as well. This one reflecting on soil and some of the risks related to social prescribing and urban agriculture as well. And Peter mentioned the paper before as well. I think, you know, again, creative solutions aren't just about rooftops or walls or underground, but this paper actually reflected on how we could look at the cumulative impact of the way we're doing kind of hard landscaping between houses in new builds in particular, looking at edible hedgerows and other types of activities that cumulatively could really transform our cities if there was strong policy, a strong desire for change there as well. I'm going full circle here, right back to the beginning. I really feel there's so much potential here with things like that Right to Grow, that Incredible Edible, again, leading the way here. They've been so amazing at the work they've already done. Again, transforming legislation, looking at how we can open up spaces for more production in our cities. And again, this isn't just a theoretical thing. Hull being one of the first to take this on board, actually putting this into action and actually making sure that people, if they got a desire to grow their own, they can get involved in this much easier in the future. So watch this space. Keep an eye on what's going on there, because I think that's going to be really, again, I keep mentioning the word transformative tonight, but it will be a catalyst for change within our cities. And just to finish off, this is just, again, a nice mosaic of some of the sites over the years that have really influenced me, some of the people who've influenced me, some of which are sat here. Gemma from Food Sync, who I've mentioned. We work with on multiple projects. One of the pictures here showing Joe from Canada around one of the urban farms. We've got some projects here that don't exist anymore at Double East Side, where HS2 has been built in Birmingham. Again, such an impact on that community at the time. Some of the rooftop schemes, Barcelona schemes, and we can never forget Bez making an appearance again. And again, getting people like that involved, these key actors making transformation. Paul Longshaw, the late Paul Longshaw, some of you might remember from Salford Council. Again, a really powerful person who made sure that things like urban growing was at the forefront of a lot of the schemes within this city. I think I'm on time. I think I'm bang on time. Enough time for drinks and questions as well. There's a lot in there. I've left loads and loads of resources up for you at the end as well, if these slides can be shared afterwards. So you can digest this, use some of this in your funding bids if you want to as well. And there's also my contact details if you want to connect. We're really keen to work with you. If you want to get in touch with some of those papers as well, as long as no publishers are watching, I can share some of them with you if you drop me an email. And again, if there's any questions, we can either answer them now or go and have a drink and you can ask them then. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. Years ago, I was told that a good professorial inaugural lecture would be short, educative, and amusing. And I think he's hit all of those criteria for us today. And even better, he's left us 14 minutes for some questions. I've got 3 already from online. We've got a good online audience with people from all over the world, South Africa, Canada, you name it. So I've got 3 I could start with, but let's open the floor. Are there any immediate questions from here?
Hi, Mike.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Good, thanks yourself. You all right?
Nice to see you again.
I see.
I was just wondering about sort of like campaigning and influence at the moment, because it seems to me we've got a mayor of Greater Manchester who's invested in the Green Spaces Fund, a grants programme which I know about. We've got an MP in Wythenshawe who's behind the right to grow, Mike Kane. And obviously thinking about our mayor of Greater Manchester, who's a former frontline shadow health minister as well, so understands the links between environment, be it light determinants or direct, get involved with diet and physical exercise and all that sort of thing. But obviously these things cost money, to upgrade spaces and definitely maintain them, and to run health sessions with vulnerable people. But just how is what you've told us tonight, is it getting into these people in these high offices to influence them as much as we all in this room feel it needs to be done?
So for online, the question was more about how do you convince the people with the power and the money to do some of the activities that we've been talking about?
That's a very good question. Thanks again for coming tonight, Kieran. Obviously, doing a lot of wonderful work with Sober City. If you get the chance to have a look at what they're doing as well. I think the message is getting across. There's a lot of work to be done. I've never seen so much funding before, as you were talking about, for these schemes, and from some weird and wonderful funding schemes, not the Greater Manchester one, but other pots of funding that exist. As you say, though, a lot of that is often small scale in nature. It might be for a year. It might even be for a new scheme that might distract a project from doing something, and they have to divert to do something else as well. And I've heard that before from some projects who've said that, well, we just don't have the capacity for that particular funding as well. So, it is getting there. I think the message is getting across to these key actors, but there's a lot more that can be done. I think as academics, we have, we can obviously try and influence policy. That's one of our main goals, is to make that impact, environmental change, but also policy. Great to hear about Mike as well, actually. He was involved in Wythenshawe, Mike Kane, really took a role in that as well. But I think there's a lot more that we can do as well as academics, as researchers, to get that across. I know there's been a lot of debates recently down in Westminster around this as well. But again, regionally, very much I agree with you, Greater Manchester doing a lot and leading the way. I think it's about getting those messages across again of the wider benefits of these spaces, more sustainable funding, less ad hoc around grants, and again, these benefits that these spaces that can provide really. As you were talking about before, and I think we've discussed, grants often lead to competition, maybe less collaboration as well in some cases. I've gone off on a tangent there, but I think it's a really good question. I think it's going in the right direction, but I think there's a lot more that we can do in particular. Oh, sorry.
Just to be fair, I'll go next to an online question, and I think this is one from one of your more local people who couldn't actually be physically here with us, and you might have partially answered that. And the question is, which community gardening projects would you recommend visiting in this region?
There's so many. I'm going to get in trouble if I don't mention them now because there's so many. Actually, the first part of Guerrilla that we're working on is mapping a lot of these, and I think I'm looking at my colleagues, and just the sheer scale that are coming up as part of that baseline assessment is astonishing. There's so much good work even happening here regionally that I wasn't aware of as well. I've mentioned some of the larger scale ones, so Withenshaw Community Farms open to the public. You've got Woodbank, you've got some in Buell Hill as well. Incredible Education around the corner from here, which is open most of the week. There are so many out there. A lot of the city sites as well. So many to mention. I think the main thing is to go online. We're hoping to create an accessible database as well of some of these in the next year or so to make it even easier to track some of these down. It depends if you want to see a community garden or an urban farm, but a lot of the ones that I've mentioned are open to the public, so you don't have to book to go in and see them. Obviously, Northern Routes as well, being further to the north, part of Greater Manchester, is a great scheme, which is right on your doorstep too.
Okay, so that's a good answer for urban growing tourism. Any other from here, please?
Connecting what you do now, Mike, back to the urban agriculture bit, and back to guerrilla gardening, and actually thinking about right to grow, and how that then plays out for those that would have engaged in guerrilla gardening previously. Are they still as motivated to use those spaces? Is there something about the semi-illegality of it that actually attracts particular communities in? And would we start to see a shift to different types of community groups really being involved in those right to grow areas now?
So really, maybe this is, do guerrilla gardeners grow up and grow out of the naughtiness to do other types of urban growing activities? I know you've thought about that. It's embedded in the PhD.
It is. It's a good question, Mike. I think a really good question. There's such a spectrum of guerrilla gardeners. There's those who do it for, I think, some of the research that I've done shows that some do it for a bit of a kick, potentially. So a bit of a naughty, thing to do, which is different. And so you can imagine that kind of illegal side of things might not draw them out and want to formalize. But there are some who genuinely are just, disheartened when they go and they just want to create a space, and the obstacles that they've got just to jump through are quite intimidating. They don't know where to start. And I think that will open up avenues for them to get involved as well. It's really interesting, though, that, I think what I'd love to do if I get a bit more time at some point is to go back and do some of the guerrilla research, not just for that, but also linking it to the agenda that we're looking at the moment around the health impacts, particularly, because a lot of our research focuses on formal spaces, but you can imagine there's parallels here with the informal guerrilla activity as well that could provide the same kind of benefits, the same opportunities as a community garden or urban farm might. Just because it's guerrilla gardening doesn't mean it's not providing some of those social and health benefits as well. But yeah, I'd love to go back and get embedded, and I'm still in touch with some of the groups and some of the organisations, and it's something that I'll definitely be asking them when I go for a pint with them next, I think.
And we've got another online question for you, Mike. What do you see as the main opportunities for the city farmer movement? It says, anticipating growth in the next 50 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what do you see as the main opportunities for the farm movement in the next 50 years? I think there's a lot of opportunities. Again, I mentioned this pretty much about everything, but it's true. I've never seen so much interest in the spectrum of activity than before. Kira mentioned the funding and so on. We're seeing private developers getting involved in this now as well, thinking outside the box with regards to master plans. So I think that main opportunity around the local food agenda, short food supply chains. People love to see it on their, if you go to a restaurant and it says local food, often you might pay a bit more of a premium because you can see where that's coming from as well. So I think there's huge opportunities for the city farming movement to seize upon that going forwards. I think sites like Northern Roots show how they can be multifunctional again, and how they can be having several revenue streams and much broader impact beyond food too. So I think, again, there's so many opportunities moving forward for this. Again, still a lot of challenges over the next 50 years as well. I'm not standing up here and saying the city farming movement will ever feed our cities, and that's silly of me to see, but it can add a lot of supply. It can help reduce pressure on those more conventional services, you might argue. And I feel that that's something we'll see scaling up over time, hopefully in the right way.
Guess what, Mike? I think you've nearly answered another of the online questions, which was about, do you think urban farming could feed the city?
Okay. Yeah, I think I've answered that one already. Again, I think it can add a lot of value, and it isn't just about the productive side of things, as we found out tonight through, again, research Michelle, Penny, and others have done around the health benefits of these spaces, how they can provide so much more than box schemes and some local produce for restaurants. Particularly the high-tech element is really exciting. I go and see, again, the farm urbans, these other hydroponic, aquaponic schemes as well. There's a lot of excitement around them at the moment as well. And obviously a lot of issues with those types of schemes too, you might say. So I think it's something we're going to see hotly debated. I don't think it'll feed a city by any means, but again, taking that pressure off conventional systems, reconnecting communities with food systems where possible as well.
There was me thinking you'd answered it before. Another one from inside, perhaps. Paul.
Oh, sorry.
So do people move from being participants in urban greening to actually small-scale enterprises?
Yes, there's quite a few that I'd, depending on the type of space I'm thinking about here. I mentioned Farm Urban before, who are doing some wonderful work. And we're looking at Andy. We're going to catch up with them next week, I think, in a bit more depth as well. I'm going to pick on an Ian site as well, who's local, Incredible Education, which is a wonderful space. And Ian, I think, is someone who was a teacher, who was part of the Incredible Edible movement, and went into this as kind of a hobby at first, and it turned into a business. And now, if you go to their site, again, just it's multifunctional. It's a space for so many different things to happen, not just food production. They've got the forest school there as well. And I met with Ian the other way. It's going from strength to strength. And I think Ian's story is a local story that kind of perhaps links to what you were talking about there as well. As someone who was doing it at the side of their job at first and has transitioned now into having that as the full-time occupation, making a substantial impact on Salford's community and beyond. Cleveley Forest Garden, if you get the chance, and if Adelina, who's in the audience, has wrote about it as well, so check out Adelina's paper if you get the chance and you're interested in what they're doing down there at the Cleveley Forest Garden, which is about 10 minutes away from here, I think, so not far in Eccles.
I know there are still more questions, but perhaps those with us here in person could save the questions for a little bit later on. I think we've pretty much run out of time for the live session, and so we'll also say goodbye to all those who've joined us online. Thank you for joining Mike's inaugural lecture.